Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has formally endorsed Donald Trump.
Oh, wow.
Get out of here.
Nice.
In a tweet, he said, the great and powerful Elon Musk, if it wasn't for him, we'd be effed. He makes what I think is the most compelling case for Trump you'll hear, and I agree with him every step of the way. For the record, yes, that's an endorsement of Trump. Enjoy the podcast.
Oh, I guess
there are going to be so many videos of him saying offensive things on the internet tomorrow. All the N-word tapes are going to get played again tomorrow. Like, every bad thing this man has said is about to get raked up.
It's fine. It's fine.
He's going to be fine.
Why did it take
He doesn't
Elon
need
Musk?
Yeah.
Like,
Is this a podcast with him?
Yes.
With Musk? Okay.
Yes.
spoke to Trump, but it was Elon who convinced him.
Elon is the most. I think Elon is the most important living human.
I agree. I'll just say this. He's kind of a weird guy, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Buying X and doing the best he can for free speech. He's not perfect. But SpaceX and the work he's doing with Starship is, if the Earth gets wiped out, if something happens, that's it. If we start expanding and we develop our technologies and we move to the stars, I believe that makes humans invincible. I mean that figuratively. But Joe Rogan, on the eve of the election at 8:45 p.m., just tweeting his endorsement.
Huge.
It's huge, but at the same time, it's the lightest way he could have done it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if tomorrow maybe Joe will put out a statement or something on video.
Sorry,
But
I was
this is-
drunk.
I don't know. This is going to
Like
be...
to apologize.
Every single news outlet right now is writing this. It is it's fascinating and hilarious at the same time because who's Joe Rogan? You know what I mean?
So-
Yeah.
He's a comedian. He's a celebrity. I get it. He has the biggest podcast, but everybody was waiting for his endorsement.
Jeremy, this ties into something I think that you said earlier. You said how the left actually does the things that they say. And you mentioned, or Joe mentions that he spoke to Elon, and the Harris administration has made it clear that they're going to use the powers at their disposal, likely the Justice Department, to go after people like Elon Musk, platforms like X. You have experience fighting the government because of the lawsuits that you brought and winning. Is it your sense that a Harris administration will go after people like Joe Rogan, like Elon Musk, maybe podcasters, maybe they'll come after some of your businesses because of your endorsement of Donald Trump and because of your resistance to the mandates from the government? Is it your sense that that's a reality? Because it's my sense, and that's one of the things that I find most off-putting about the idea of a Kamala Harris administration is her hostility to the individual liberties that we have too long taken for granted.
Yes. There's no question that the left will weaponize the government to penalize their political opponents. They've been doing it. I mean, Barack Obama famously weaponized the IRS against his political enemies, including my organization at the time, Friends of Abe, a 501c3 that I was the executive director of in Los
wasn't even aware of
Angeles
this.
at the time, and had to fight them and got some help from some friendly senators who helped us repel that attack. They've already weaponized the DOJ to go after Donald Trump. We've seen that, and many instances of actual Americans who aren't famous, Americans who don't have big names, being criminalized by the left. The left is the threat to our freedom. They are the threat to our national sovereignty. They are the threat to our traditional values, the threat to our family. They are all the things that they accuse Donald Trump of being, and they are those things in practice. Something you said earlier that I think is really interesting is that the left does all the worst things that they say they're going to do, but they also say a bunch of conservative things, and they don't do those.
Yeah.
And that is an interesting aspect of our country, is that politicians left and right run to the right.
Yeah.
And then neither of them do the things that they said they were going to do to the right.
Yeah.
And so Donald Trump's right is much further right than Kamala Harris's right, but he's not going to do those things.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris's right is much more close to the middle than Donald Trump's right, but she's not going to do those things either. Everyone promises the country, to Ben's point earlier, everyone sort of promises some sort of return to normalcy. But the left in particular does the worst things that they say that they're going to do. When they say that they're going to clamp down on freedom of speech, they are. When they say that they're going to look into this Elon Musk character, they are. And if you want to know why, listen, I don't know Elon Musk. I admire Elon Musk. I think he's the most important living human, and I like to say the most important American, mostly because it ticks off the groypers or whatever who try to point out to me that he's not an American, even though he's obviously the greatest living American.
He's an American.
But Elon Musk is trying to build the future. The next 3 to 4 years will be the most important years for determining the regulatory environment for everything that Elon Musk cares about. They're going to determine over the next 3 to 4 years to what extent private companies like his have access to space. They're going to determine over the next 3 to 4 years to what extent we're allowed to embrace AI. They're going to determine over the next 3 to 4 years to what extent we're allowed to embrace autonomous driving. They're going to decide over the next 3 to 4 years to what extent we're able to directly interface physically with machines in a way that he's doing through Neuralink. They're going to determine to what extent we're able to embrace the revolution of robotics that is at hand. I think people don't realize these things are at hand right now. Like the Jetsons' future is here. The 9.9 earthquake already happened in Japan. The tidewater has already receded. There's no question about us getting wet. It's only now a question of when. The event already took place. And what the left wants to do is crack down on all of that, stymie human innovation, use protectionist policies, use punitive policies to keep it from happening. And all they'll do is ensure that China and Russia and our adversaries steal the technology from people like Elon and get ahead of us and destroy American hegemony around the world. I'm not saying there's not some responsible legislation that should happen around these things. I think anyone would tell you that there is, but the left actually wants to stop it. I think that's why the most important living American has so passionately embraced politics. Because politics is kind of a losing gambit for a guy like Elon Musk, except that he knows that everything he cares about, up to and including free speech, is actually on the ballot tomorrow. That's why I'm voting for Donald Trump. It's why I think Elon Musk is voting for Donald Trump. I suspect it's why Joe Rogan is voting for Donald Trump.
Amen. I got to bounce now. Ben Shapiro's here to take my spot, but I just want to let everybody know, if you go over to freedomtunes.com, you can become a member, help us make more cartoons. And if you go to our YouTube channel, Freedom Tunes, we released a video today called Kamala Polling at 100% with people who vote at 3 a.m. I think it's a very funny video. I think you guys will really enjoy it. I want to encourage you to go over there and check it out. Thank you all so much for having me.
half the voices in
Yeah, he's like half the voices in the video. So
I'm the
go
sleepy
over
guys.
youtube.com/freedomtunes. Thank you guys so much.
But this is perfect because I need to hear Ben Shapiro's take on Joe Rogan's endorsement of Donald Trump. All right.
You leave for 5 minutes during this campaign, you know? And Joe Rogan has endorsed Donald Trump. Okay, so that was obviously kind of on the way, right? I mean, we all kind of saw that one coming. All right, listen, Joe's great. Joe's been heterodox this entire time. The chances that he was going to endorse Kamala, particularly after she insisted that he travel to her and then come on bended knee and do a 1 hour interview, which to Joe, I mean, some of us in the room have been on Joe's show, and you know, 1 hour is called the introduction.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Like 1 hour is where he just asks you if you've tried ayahuasca. Like that's like just the first hour. So the idea that he was going to, endorse her is ridiculous. It is. This election is so much about whether dudes turn out. That really is just the entire story of this election. If dudes turn out, Trump wins. If dudes do not turn out, Trump loses. That's the entirety of the election. I mean, Tim Walz actually sort of Doug Emhoff. Sorry, I mixed the two of them up because they're such betas. But Doug Emhoff sort of gave the game away. He said, I've been meeting with men, which is, he can't define them, but he's meeting with men who are going to vote now for Kamala Harris, but they had to stop watching podcasts and stop looking at the UFC. And it's like, and cut themselves in weird places. And they had to
This is
castrate
what they're
themselves.
so afraid of. They're waging a war on podcasts.
Well, I'm concerned about that. I mean, we're all in the podcast industry. This is what that New York Times piece was all about. There's a New York Times and Washington Post piece. Both of those were hit pieces on our industry. They were clearly an attempt to destroy our ability to make a living because they don't like what we're saying. And that's Joe too. I mean, Joe knows this, okay? They went after him on Spotify because he refused to bow to all of the crap that the public health minds were saying. And Joe went along with it for a time until he stopped going along with it. But Joe is bigger than they are. And that is something that we are watching the end in real time. This is the celebratory point, no matter how this election goes. We are watching in real time the collapse of the legacy media. And the only way they can maintain their dominance is if they participate in censorship and get these social media platforms to censor all of our businesses.
I just posed a question. Let me real quick. I just posed a question to Jeremy about that. Is it your sense that do you feel like the government will come after not only Joe Rogan and people like Elon Musk? Do you think that the Department of Justice will come after people like yourselves and people like Tim?
I mean, they'll look for any excuse to certainly launch lawsuits against us. I mean, they're going after Elon right now for the signal failure of SpaceX to hire enough refugees. Right? Literally, that's what the DOJ is doing. So that would not be a giant chop. But I don't think they even need to do that. I think that the way they like to work is through informal mechanisms of pressure. They like to call in Mark Zuckerberg. They did this already. They like to call in Mark Zuckerberg and they like to call in Elon. And then they like to say to those people, if you don't do what we say, we will essentially regulate your company out of business. So just do what we say, and then it'll never come to that. I mean, Dianne Feinstein literally said that to Zuckerberg. And Zuckerberg is considered, the big villain on the right these days. But the reality is that if you go back and you look at what Zuckerberg was saying in 2019 at Georgetown on free speech, he sounds like one of us. Right? And if you look at what he's saying now, he's sounding more like he did in 2019. Right? He's kind of starting to make a turn on that. And, they don't like that very much. And so if Kamala Harris is elected, I think that you're going to see enormous amounts of pressure brought on all of these outlets to shut down, quote unquote, disinformation and misinformation. And the thing is that the Supreme Court failed on this front, right? There was a Supreme Court case that was launched on these grounds about censorship during the 2020 election. And the Supreme Court found that you didn't have standing to sue if Facebook shut down your posts, because supposedly they might have had another reason to do that. But if the government uses social media as a cutout for censorship, that is obviously a form of censorship.
Wait, so you think that if Kamala wins, the social media censorship will get worse?
Yes.
That's interesting because it seems like Trump's victory in 2016 was the catalyst for so much of that social media censorship.
Interestingly, though, having gone through that, building a media company during that time, the truth is that during the Trump administration, the social media platforms played much, much, much more fairly with us. It doesn't mean that there weren't problems. There are always problems. They're opposed to us. They dislike us. They hate our point of view. They want to suppress us. But they were afraid of the Trump administration. They were afraid, particularly in those first 2 years when we also had control of the House and the Senate. They were deeply afraid of there being government action from the right against them. And then from 2020 to today, you've seen the worst excesses of what's happened on the platform. So I don't mean to defend their actions during the early Trump days, but I do think it's a bit of yes, they were outraged by Trump, and yes, there was a lot of rhetoric around it, but their actual behavior is so much more nefarious now than it's ever been.
I have to be optimistic seeing the endorsement of Trump by Joe Rogan, and considering the show that we're doing here with, you've got neocon Elaad, Ben Shapiro, Jeremy Boring, you've got Mary. The politics are relatively different between all of us. I come from when I was younger, I was very far left, anarchist, punk rock, skateboarding, protesting, all that stuff. Moderated quite a bit. Still consider myself to be fairly moderate and left-leaning in certain areas. Phil, you consider yourself what, fairly libertarian, or how do you view yourself?
A disaffected libertarian, because the libertarians are ridiculous.
There you go.
So it's a fair characteristic.
Disaffected liberal, disaffected libertarian, conservatives, neocon.
I think we just don't hate communists. I think that's what it comes down. That's the common denominator.
I mean,
but
I
also
introduce
Joe
myself
Rogan
as an anti-communist every single show,
I see a point that I make all the time, especially when it comes to abortion, is that we all have a conversation where we're trying to figure it out, and the left is absolutist. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.